Hi, I'm Mike Brady, and this short film is for mothers and others who've decided to use formula to feed their babies, be it infant formula, follow-on formula, or milk for older babies. I aim to respond to questions such as, which is the best formula? What's the difference between the different brands on the market? What's the purpose of this ingredient, which is in one formula and not another formula? And I also want to look at how to mix up formula to make it as safe as can be possible. I work for Baby Milk Action, which aims to protect breastfeeding and to protect babies that are fed on formula. The information in this little film is going to be objective, independent, and based on science. We want to provide information that you can trust. The purpose of this film is not to convince you that you should breastfeed instead of formula feed. We're starting from the position that you've made your decision. Hopefully you'll have had information about infant feeding, and you'll know of the advantages of breastfeeding and the disadvantages of formula feeding. You'll know that formula-fed babies are at greater risk of short and long-term illness, for example. You should also be aware that introducing feeding bottles interrupts the process of lactation and can lead to milk production falling and eventually stopping. But there's a flip side to that, of course. If you've introduced bottles and want to go back to breastfeeding or increase milk production, then the more your baby suckles, the more milk that is produced. But if you've decided to use formula and you look at products on the supermarket shelves and the different prices for them, you're probably going to be confused. I know I am. What's the difference between them? Where can you find the advice on which formula to use? There's a vacuum of independent, objective information, and we've been calling on the Department of Health to provide this information. As it's not yet available as we would like, we've decided to make this little film. But let's first look at the advice that the Department of Health does give to parents who've decided to use formula. Searching around on the Department of Health website, the NHS Direct website, the Food Standards Agency website, you don't actually find much information about infant formula. On the NHS website, you do see, before deciding whether to breastfeed or bottle feed your baby, you should ensure that you are fully aware of the advantages and disadvantages of both methods. If you have any questions or concerns about a particular feeding method, your GP, practice nurse, midwife, or a breastfeeding counsellor will be able to give you help and advice. If you decide to bottle feed your baby using formula milk, it is particularly important that you receive information, support and advice from a healthcare professional in order to ensure that your baby gets the nutrition that they need. Here's some basic information about formula. Standard formula is based on cow's milk, but you must not use cow's milk for babies under 1 year of age. Cow's milk has a higher ratio of casein to whey than breast milk, something like 80 to 20% rather than 40 to 60%. Casein turns to curds in a baby's stomach, which are hard to digest. So the ratio of casein to whey in the cow's milk has to be adjusted to make the formula. Some formulas maintain a high ratio of casein and are marketed as foods for hungrier babies because they produce the curds in the stomach which are hard to digest. Whether this is a good thing is open to debate. It is also important to know that soya formula should only be used on medical advice and that formula based on goat's milk is not permitted. So how do you understand the differences between the different brands on the market? Now, health workers also complain about a shortage of information. This means they have to look to the companies for information. But as we shall see, there are some problems with doing this. Not least, they all claim that their formula is the best. So who's telling the truth? And the sad fact is that the companies don't tell the truth about their products. They're promoting them, they're trying to increase their sales. That's why they always say that their formula is better than others on the market. Indeed, there's one particular formula that puts that on the label, saying it's the best infant formula. The Advertising Standards Authority has investigated the claims on the follow-on formula, saying it's the best, and they found that this could not be substantiated. So we need to look to independent information. In Australia, the Australian National Health and Medical Research Council has published some quite clear guidance. They say the prices of different infant formulas and the types of retail outlets that sell the formulas are not related to quality or nutritional value. All infant formulas sold in Australia meet the relevant nutritional and quality control standards. Use of a particular formula by a hospital does not mean that formula is the best one. Interchange between formulas within the same generic group is optional and can be decided on the basis of cost. Now, it would be useful to have such a clear statement in the UK. But the fact is, in the UK, all formula that is sold has to comply with the infant formula and follow-on formula regulations, and these set out the composition of formula, the ingredients that should be in it. So any formula that is being sold should, by law, be meeting those composition requirements. It should have the ingredients that are known to be essential for developing babies. The law also has regulations about labelling and promotion, and it says that companies cannot make claims about extra ingredients that are in their formula, except for a few claims that are on a list that's attached to the law. Now, unfortunately, companies make claims that are not on that list. Sometimes the authorities will take action and have these removed. But it's always a struggle because the companies use these claims to try to sell their products. But let's have a look at these claims that are on the formula, the ones that are allowed and the ones that are not allowed, so we can understand a bit more about the ingredients that are in formula. So these are the claims that companies can make, and these are the only ones that they are allowed to make. They can say the formula contains lactose only, if that's the only carbohydrate present. They can say it's lactose free if the lactose content is below a certain level, and that may be an issue if your baby is lactose intolerant. They can say that there's an added LCP, which is a long chain polyunsaturated fatty acid. And a lot of companies do claim that these are added, but then they make suggestions as to the benefits of LCPs, and we'll look at those a bit later. They can also put a note on formula labels saying that it contains taurine, oligosaccharides or nucleotides, and you'll sometimes see this, although they sometimes jazz up the names. So instead of oligosaccharides, you'll see the term prebiotics. That is not actually allowed by the law. Claims will also be made, or there will be suggestions in advertising, that ingredients make the formula closer to breast milk. Now, to be very careful here, although ingredients that have been added to formula may be found in breast milk, the quantity and the type may be different. For example, breast milk contains something like 130 different types of oligosaccharides. Formula contains a handful of different types, and these have been synthesized. There are also issues about how the ingredients behave in formula compared to breast milk. For example, with iron, there's far more iron in formula than there is in breast milk. The iron in breast milk is absorbed very efficiently by the child, but most of the iron in formula will pass through the baby's digestive system. To make sure the child gets as much iron as it needs, far more iron has to be present in the infant formula. So in that case, it's good that the formula is not the same as breast milk. If the iron was the same in its quantity, then the baby would not get enough because it doesn't absorb it as efficiently. So what we should really be looking at is not has the formula had ingredients added that are the same or similar to those in breast milk, but what are the impacts on the baby?